Welcome to Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf, and this is part 3 of 5 things that will eat your profits, 5 mistakes, specifically while you are implementing the changes you need to make to stay profitable in this market, to serve your customers better in this market. Do you have, here it is, ready? Well, you know what? Let me back up for a second and tell you a story. Let me share something with you that I experienced. Manufacturing company that I was doing some work for, in the aircraft industry. We're touring the production facility and asking some questions, and we're watching somebody, just handcraft a shim. This is a lady that had to take a half-inch thick, couple inches square piece of aluminum and hand shape it to correctly shim apart so that it would fit properly in the build of the aircraft. This process took a week for every aircraft. Think about that, a week for every aircraft. This was on the critical path for the build of the aircraft. Or in other words, this adds a week to how fast, if you're not familiar with critical path from project management, talk to one of your project managers and they'll help you with that. Here's the gist of it. The tasks that have to be done in sequence and determine the minimum amount of time in which you can complete the project. So in this case, the build of an aircraft. So this goes on the critical path, makes it longer, the amount of time it takes to build the aircraft longer by a week. Think about the cost of a manufacturing day for the build of an aircraft. Right? You have thousands of people on payroll. You have a massive facility, hundreds of thousands of square feet of space that you're paying for in order to build the aircraft. Now you need an extra week of use of those resources, an extra week of those expenses. And here's someone who is a master craft person that is dedicated to doing nothing but handcrafting a piece of metal in order to accommodate variation in the product in order to have a safe flight-worthy aircraft. An entire week. Now, the next most masterful person in that process took a month to make a shim. So that would add, if change people, if something happened to this lady, if she retired, went on vacation, the person that would replace her that was the best at doing that would add 3 more weeks to the minimum time it took to build the aircraft. So reviewing the process with them, and it became clear that all we needed to do is change the sequence and the orientation of what she was working on, the assembly of the aircraft at that point, change the sequence, flip the orientation of what was being installed at that point in the aircraft, and the need for the shim would go away, and this person who was so good at what she did could be moved to a higher value role. Well, here's the problem with making that simple change: misaligned incentives. See, for that type of change, only a tooling engineer had the authority to investigate that problem and implement it, which meant I got fired for doing that. I didn't get walked off the property. I was on payroll at this company. I got fired, but not removed from payroll. So that was a whole big conversation. There was a big drama around that. I'm like, look, here's the recommendation. Do this. You're saving yourself a lot of heartache. If you have really highly skilled people that can be allowed to work on something more impact, that really, in the scheme of things, more impactful to that person rather than just grinding out a little part by hand week after week, because it's production rate. So that's really what this person did full time, was making these custom handcrafted pieces and save a week on the build of the aircraft. So we could deliver an aircraft a week faster. We could get the aircraft to the next phase a week faster. So no, can't do that. So the incentive was the organization that I was working with didn't have the authority to address that particular problem. The department that did were not incentivized to focus on that problem. They were being measured on their performance to work on other problems. Even though the overall directive for all of us was we needed to be able to deliver aircraft faster. We needed to reduce cost in the aircraft without affecting quality or reliability of the aircraft. Of course, right? Flight safety, huge issue. This is commercial airliners. Because of the misalignment in incentives, and there were other incentives misaligned as well, uh, the department that could have addressed that problem said, no, we're not going to do that. And instead, they invested their time and money in fighting recommendations to make changes. Are your people misaligned in their incentives, especially when you put together a project change to implement something new? Right? What happens, and this comes back to what we've been talking about, part of this series is, Ken Blanchard companies say 70% of change initiatives in companies fail to deliver the business results that was originally anticipated. This is one of the 5 key failure points, or 5 things that commonly cause that failure to achieve business results. Think about that. What are the incentives for everybody involved? People outside the team, do they have an incentive to make the change? How does that affect them? So you need to look at that. How are people compensated whose performance is defined and measured in a way that they are incentivized to not do what you need them to do, to not go along with the change? Who on the team is incentivized in a way that's going to be counterproductive to the functioning of the team? If you have somebody from sales, and you should, on pretty much anything, there should always be sales input because they're the ones that have the most direct contact with customers, sales and customer service. Are they incentivized to participate on teams like that? If they're assigned to a team like that, is it just an extra assignment headache that takes them away from the high value to them, because that's what maxes out their performance, their bonus, their career opportunities, right? To make a sale, not working on some initiative to be able to, I don't know, reduce cost, increase productivity, get a better software system involved in accounting. Should sales be involved in that? Oh, yeah, for a lot of reasons, because that software is going to determine their bonus payout, right? For their sales that they're making. But are they incentivized to do that? There's another example. Heard a story recently from someone who was talking about, they were running product development for a company, and what they found was that at one of the factories, they were working on reducing costs. They had to take 10% of the cost out of the product every year. So they're visiting a plant manager. This person's visiting a plant manager and finds out that the plant manager had scheduled production so that the plant was running at the level of efficiency and capacity that maxed out his bonus, had the factory run that way, whether or not there were orders for what he was making. So he's increasing cost. He's adding cost by increasing inventory that's not being sold. Now, this isn't, I'm going to turn this into a lecture on inventory management and just in time and all of that. We can talk about that in a later episode. Here's the thing. His incentive was misaligned with the larger goal of the company. And so this head of product development is saying, "Man, it's driving us because now couldn't get the change." And I go, "Well, look, what do you want? This executive is doing what the executive is being paid for, right? Run at this capacity, and you max out your bonus." The incentives were not structured properly in order to guide what that person needed to do, that person's behavior, that person's leadership focus, in order to meet the company's larger goal of cost reduction and speed to market. There's other things that could affect. So look at that. How are you incentivizing your people? And is that consistent? Really, be honest. Is it really consistent with what you're asking them to do? What you need them to do? What you're saying at hey, here's this year's focus. Did you adjust the performance measurements and bonus incentives accordingly? If you've got more than 35 people in your company, that may be a problem. Now, this is one of the 5 things that bites leaders in the what when they are implementing changes. Also happens on just due course on day-to-day functioning of the business. This is something that you need to work with your team on making sure is very consistent. Are the incentives lined up? And if something's misaligned, there's exceptions. If you need to make an exception, at least then it's a purposeful decision. You know why you're doing it. You hopefully can contain that for amount of time, because the more that you have people lined up, like they're right, like they're rowing in a crew boat, and you see this where they're racing, and they're all going. You got somebody counting out the stroke. The more you have everybody lined up like that, the better the company's going to operate. The more effective you're going to be in the marketplace, the better customer experience you can provide. The better you can learn what works for making the company operate better, for making the customers want to do business with you more, and implement changes. And if you're not learning and implementing changes, your days are numbered. Your competition is eventually going to take your customers because they'll provide a better experience. They'll provide more value. So that's part 3 of the 5-part series. Thanks for being part of Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf. Great having you here in the conversation. Smash that like button, leave comments. If you're watching this afterwards, on a replay, put in comments, questions. We watch those. We make sure we get answers. Something I can't answer, I'll tell you what, I got a list of colleagues that can provide the answer to the question you're asking. So again, this is Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf. Thanks for being part of the conversation. I will see you on the trail.